So the screen should be saying autonomous sales pipelines. Cool. So we're going to dive right into this. I mean, I haven't included a slide in here about myself because I wanted to focus more on the topic today, as we've only got an hour as well. But just a bit of background about me and what it is I do. My name is Jeremiah. Friends call me Jay. Clients call me JI. I've been a creative AI consultant in this space for coming up to about 4 or 5 years now. I typically work with corporations and startups. Right now, I have contracts with Bloomberg and Adobe, and I essentially help them use AI to conduct research, create communications, and automate tasks. I also run a YouTube channel called the Everyday AI channel, where I've been posting about the best new AI tools every day for slightly over 270 days now. In fact, today is exactly the 272nd. So that's been a great exercise in research. And lastly, I run a small media agency called Polished Pixels, where we make every pixel count, and every asset we generate is of course AI generated. So it's great to be here. I've been seeing a lot of interesting things in, sales and also a bit of marketing, but primarily sales in terms of the development of how AI can be used at all those three stages. So I like to boil down AI use cases and business value adds into those three buckets I just mentioned, which are, of course, creating communications, conducting research, and automating tasks. And, these are essentially crucial aspects of the sales pipeline. You need to conduct enough research to know what your ICP would look like or what your target audience looks like. So you know essentially how you can create communications that will appeal to them. And once that's been done at a level that can be scaled, then of course the last piece of the puzzle is to automate it and free up your own time. So essentially in the era that we're currently in, which is the era of autonomous sales, where a lot of algorithms are actually proactively looking for leads and scoring people on their intent and likelihood to close, as well as how soon they are likely to be closed as a lead. It's really important just simply to be aware primarily, and also to see where the low-hanging fruit lies. And by that, of course, I'm referring to methods of implementation that are low effort but high impact. Right. So the key here is to be able to automate a series of things or a series of processes or research that can actually compound along the entire sales funnel. Okay, great. So what are we seeing a lot right now? Well, we're currently in the era of what has been called agentic commerce. Now, the fact that things like ChatGPT agent can actually go and purchase things for people is something that a lot of people, well, the vast majority of people would probably not have seen coming a number of years ago, unless you were truly sort of tapped into what was going on. So there have been three primary sort of stages in terms of sales. Considering where we've come from in terms of business and where we are. So, of course, we started off with manual prospecting, with spreadsheets and cold calls. And then we sort of moved on to basic automation with CRM workflows and, being able to schedule emails that you would write, let's say late at night, but they would go to the actual senders, in the mornings in a particular sequence. And now, of course, we have agentic systems that can think, learn, and improve all on their own. Now, this is like monumental, because it really means that everyone needs to sort of become a bit more of a strategist when it comes to how they approach business at large, and also particularly sales, right? Now, it's estimated that about 30% of sales tasks can now be automated with AI. And of course, that number is only going to keep growing. And my professional opinion is that it will do so exponentially. Leads can be closed in about 15% less time now, thanks to agentic systems, and about 25% of time spent from manual prospecting can also now be reclaimed thanks to these agentic structures and agentic systems. So it's really important to be, aware of how these things are changing the way resources are distributed along and between sales workflows in a business, right? Great. So the obvious bottleneck is the fact that there are only 24 hours in a day, and there's only so much we can do within that time. And there's only so much time or energy, attention, and even capital that we can actually sort of distribute intelligently throughout the day by the very nature of being human. But of course, these models don't have that manual research, sequential outreach, go doing things one by one in a repetitive manner. All of that sort of method of work is very quickly becoming a thing of the past, right? Because now agentic models can actually do things in parallel. So, for example, there's a popular case study, and this sort of case study is becoming more and more like widespread, as in I'm seeing similar case studies of sales AI voice callers essentially calling hundreds of leads all within the same sort of like 5 to 10 minutes. Now this is just completely changes the game, because now time is no longer, I guess, the biggest bottleneck in terms of how do I put this? How proactive you can be in terms of your outreach. So lead generation used to be a funnel. Now it is certainly an algorithm, and it's a series of workflows that can be employed in order to scale any sort of process. It's really important to be aware of this and to also understand the nature of autonomous sales engines. So that's what we'll move right on to. Now, these are essentially the sort of keywords you may want to look for when you are looking at AI tools in the sales sort of field. So you will want to separate them into one of these four. Now, some of them may provide a suite, but essentially they should be broken down into prospect, enrich, score, and outreach. Now, it may be, I guess, for smaller teams, it may be easier to look for singular tools for each one, and perhaps you can get a free or freemium model, or maybe if you can get away with only having to sort of pay for one or the fewest amount of these sort of stages, then that would be great. Of course, you could look into automation platforms like Zapier and Make.com to actually create more modular sort of autonomous sales systems. But essentially, I'm sure we're all familiar with this. Prospecting is where it all starts. So even just how you approach that. So are you going to LinkedIn? Are you going to X? Are you looking at, like AI powered databases like Apollo and all these sort of things that have scraped the internet? Are you scraping the internet for competitors' websites and looking for, any pieces of information that could leave you trails about the kind of people that are actually coming onto their website? So all these sort of things are really like some of the new sort of first steps to take in the prospecting journey. Now, next, of course, you've got enriching. So you want to gather key aspects of your ICP and essentially be able to filter through those. Let's say if you have like a wider database, or perhaps you want to target a specific kind of a person or persona within your target audience, it's going to be important to be able to actually categorize that. And let's say you're generating leads, like using an AI tool like Apollo, then you're going to want to make sure you've really dialed in the key aspects such as company size, the number of people working there, what is the nature of the company, are they product based or service based, and what does their typical sort of sales cycle look like whenever they're purchasing new products, things like that. And those can be a great way to sort of prioritize certain leads over others because they are more likely to close. And of course, staying on the vein of prioritizing certain leads, you have scoring, which allows you to evaluate and basically rank which leads are most likely to close if you actually apply some pressure, or if you actually like follow up in a proactive way. And then lastly, of course, you've got outreach, which is essentially being able to feed back all of that data that you gain from prospecting, enriching, and scoring, and actually creating and improving and optimizing systems to actually be able to do this whilst minimizing, the resources that you spend, and also creating initiatives for things like referral schemes. Right now, these can be super important, and they can be a great way to essentially have a lean approach to, your sales funnel as a whole and your sales cycle as a whole. Great stuff. So when it comes to prospecting agents, right, a lot of tools are branding themselves as AI SDRs, sales development representatives, and there are some SDRs that I suppose can now be launched thanks to things like OpenAI swarms and multi-agent architectures facilitated by platforms such as Crew AI and many other similar ones. Lindy AI is also a popular one. But essentially, these are agents that are constantly enriching and constantly updating your leads list, right, by crawling popular platforms like X, LinkedIn, potentially Reddit, niche forums, all these kind of things, and extracting signals from product reviews. For example, let's say you see a review from or let's say the agency's review that someone left on a competitor's website, and it was a very positive one. Right. A simple sort of workflow would be to get that agent to use those exact same words that customer used when expressing positive, feelings about your competitor's product or service, and then get those exact same words and use them in your copies, perhaps on your landing pages or even on your external outreach plans, which of course can also be facilitated by other agents. So key things like that, the agents being able to talk to each other. I know a popular method and strategy for products is basically just going onto Amazon and seeing the exact words people use whenever they are leaving a positive review about a product, and then essentially just using that exact same word, that exact same phrase in your advertising, in your copy, in your marketing. And this is a great way to just immediately connect. And this is a system and a concept that can easily be, sort of orchestrated using platforms like Zapier, Make.com, or even AI tools that are more specific for sales as a field of business. Cool. So a lot of these agents, what they'll do is they will be able to sort of look through and detect signals from multiple platforms. Maybe that's RSS feeds as well as Reddit, LinkedIn, social media platforms as well. Maybe even large sort of media outlets such as let's say New York Times or Reuters or any sort of tech-driven media outlet, right? They can immediately sort of look at what is trending on there and see, how can you use that to create communications, maybe create content that will resonate with your ICP. So you essentially get the narratives that are being told by big media agencies and platforms who are reporting on, let's say, your business niche, like it could be e-commerce or anything else. And then you immediately begin creating content about that so you can position your business or your personal brand as a thought leader in the space. And that's precisely how I actually got into this field of tech, as my previous career was in the arts. But it's interesting because I sort of realized that technology is creativity in disguise, and there are many creative ways you can actually start generating workflows for business processes. But I don't want to divert too much. So back onto the topic, of course, of AI sales development representatives and how you can have swarms of these, right? They essentially facilitate the ability to match your ICPs at scale. So essentially, they can scroll through the most popular platforms on the internet where people have conversations and forum-like discussions and begin identifying users who on that platform that you can target with like direct messages potentially in order to actually get them in your sales funnel as they've already fitted a list of requirements. And then of course you've got deep data augmentation. Now I think, well, I'm pretty sure that being able to have like deep access to your ICP and to people in your lead funnel is essentially going to be one of the main things that decides whether you close them or not. Because if you can feed all of that into, let's say, a large language model, then you can essentially prep yourself for the sales call, and you can already like begin vetting or fielding off any potential pushbacks that you'll get. So these are great ways to sort of just anticipate what will be said on a sales call. Also, simulating sales calls as well with ICPs is a great way to just sort of keep training, your own sales abilities. Cool. So lead scoring is, of course, another crucial one because it can mean that you are actually able to distribute your resources in a more meaningful way that can definitely aid your cash flow as a business. right? So we can now start letting models decide who actually deserves attention in terms of your lead list and who is, most likely to actually close the quickest, right? So it can start looking at things like how much does this prospect match your ICP across those firmographics that, you can of course decide on. Intent detection, what are their buying signals at the moment? Is there anything that's basically indicating that not only are they potentially going to buy, but they're potentially going to buy within a very short space of time. And velocity analysis. So basically, how quickly is this opportunity moving? Is this a lead that is hot right now, but is likely to go to a competitor if they don't receive follow-up correspondences within the next 24, 48 hours? But having access to this information can be crucial and can also, give you exactly what you need to actually start improving your bottom lines and your percentages. The main aim is essentially to compress the amount of decisions you need to make. And you can do that, of course, by leveraging large language models and AI tools specifically for sales in order to actually remove that guesswork and start prioritizing accordingly. And of course, you have, outreach automation, which is a very key thing, like sending emails that are tailored and being able to actually have dynamic variables that you can change. There's nothing worse than receiving an email that just starts off with "Hello there." I think everyone just knows that, okay, they haven't really put in much work, but really, this is one of the main value adds of AI because it allows us to personalize content and communications and to do so at scale, right? So you can also begin A/B testing things. You can start A/B testing copies in emails based on people's roles, the size of their companies, all this sort of stuff. And you can start getting data on which versions actually worked and start optimizing those. So, like I've said, AI allows you to actually scale personalization. And in sales, what that means is you can now generate templates and have multiple different versions of templates, all of which can be organized very cleanly and can be tailored based on multiple different dynamic variables, which are also mapped to that ICP's firmographics. So things like, how many people they have in their business, and of course, the nature of what they do. Do they do B2C? Do they do B2B? If so, what generates, the most amount of revenue for them and things like that. And of course, you can pretty much A/B, CTA variations. I think A/B testing is really, one of the best ways to get great decisions out of business. Really and truly, I like to think that, especially sales, given my previous background, I've always had the most success when I approached it almost as a science or like an experiment and getting the decisions and creating or making the decisions I need to make based solely on the data I receive. Okay, great stuff. So moving on from this, we've got the agentic flywheel. It's a shame. Looks like my images aren't loading. In any case, yeah, the data and the information on there is still very much relevant. So we've got data ingestion. So every interaction, every response, and every sort of conversion will feed a system and basically tell it this is what you should optimize for, this is what you shouldn't. And then, of course, this can actually give you better insight as to how you should actually approach your outreach for the next sort of cycle of sales. And then, of course, this naturally will adapt the logic you use when navigating, things like email sequences, maybe scripts for your AI voice agents. And then, of course, refining the entire model you have for your funnel, or really, in any case, a flywheel. I think one of the greatest things that, a company can do now is particularly with regards to their sales department, is to aim to transition from a funnel to a flywheel, right? I think everyone's familiar with the concept of a sales funnel. I think AI is going to make the concept of a sales flywheel even more important, and potentially even more widespread within the next 5 to 10 years. So every conversation is essentially data that teaches the system how to become a better sales development representative, right? And this is where intelligence can really compound to make sure each cycle is noticeably more effective and efficient. So essentially, it comes down to these. And this is essentially the foundation and the recommended approach. So things like lead scraping, and this is actually how I first started using AI and monetizing large language models, or even AI technology pre-large language models, was being able to actually scrape leads, of course, publicly available databases and websites, and use that to enrich databases and lead lists for clients. And this was one of the first things I was doing many years ago, like before ChatGPT. And this was where I sort of realized that AI and, the group of technologies that mimic human thinking, which is the definition of AI, is definitely going to be extremely valuable in the sales process, because of course this is these are basically like four core pillars of every sales team. And the fact that AI provides sufficient value in all of these is a great reason to actually dive more and explore the concept of using AI to augment your sales processes a lot more. Okay, cool. So really and truly, um, it's not about replacement. In any case, if I'm to be completely blunt and honest, the people who will be replaced are probably people who have like zero knowledge of AI. I think anyone who has at least a decent amount of knowledge will probably be, unfortunately, the person replacing those people. And I say decent amount, but of course I'm very much like deep in this space. So, I'm speaking relatively here. But in any case, it's definitely not something to fear, certainly something to just educate oneself on. And I think now, thanks to AI, everyone is sort of has to become a teacher of sorts, because whenever you're prompting, you're teaching the model, exactly what you want, how you want it to respond, and the sort of information you want it to provide to you. So there's a list of recommended tools that I'm sure you can all see. We've got Gong, which is quite popular. We've got Clay, Apollo, Make, LangChain as well for the slightly more technical developers. Zapier, Notion is actually really good as well. I think Airtable is pretty much the standard AI native spreadsheet for, people who aren't that technical. So it's certainly something I would recommend, and is actually a part of my stack for a project I'm working on at the moment. Cool. So, I mean, this is essentially it. I didn't want to take up too much time. I think it essentially comes down to three sort of steps. So, designing the logic, right? What are the priorities? What are going to be your KPIs? What are the rules and the thresholds? Connecting it to systems that allow it to scale, and then watching it compound. So, yeah, I think this is essentially the approach to have when it comes to using AI for sales and getting the most out of it. I've also been in a position where I've been asked to be the final decision maker when interviewing AI subject matter experts to be part of a team. This was notably for a company called General Assembly, which I do a lot of work with. So if anyone's also interested potentially in learning a bit more, yeah, it would be interesting if once we have our next round of hires, yeah, definitely feel free to get in touch. Would be great to know any other sort of sales reps and any founders who are doing some interesting things in the space and feel as if they know a lot about how you can actually use AI in sales. I've just dropped a link to my LinkedIn in the chat below. Feel free to connect, and thank you all for listening. I'll now pass over to you, Dr. Stylianos.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. That was a very insightful presentation. So just in case if anyone also wants to speak with us and take up on the offer of a free AI consultation, I dropped the link in the chat. So now I'm going to move on to my presentation on cold email using AI. Let me start the presentation mode. Um, okay, here we go. Perfect. Give me a second. Here. Okay, so the goal of my presentation this evening or afternoon, depending on where you're based, is well, it's twofold. On one, to discuss about some of the best practices behind cold email outreach and AI, and also to demonstrate some of the things that we worked on. We worked on a proof of concept. It's not actually in production, so it's not something that you guys can use, but it's something that it can give you a lot of ideas. And if you take up on our offer for a consultation, we're more than happy to just recommend specific tools or even something that can be built specifically for your needs. So, uh, in terms of the traditional way to do outreach, things like used to work a few years ago, but not so much anymore. Uh, Doing outreach through email or phone. I think also Jay mentioned AI agents for that. It would take a lot of time, and quite often it would involve a team of people, right? So someone needs to prospect using different keyword searches, and then he had all these generic templates, and every now and then someone would come up with a template that would work quite well. Then a lot of other marketers would use that template, and then it would stop working that well because it was kind of the same thing, and the only thing that you essentially customize would be like the company name and the first name and things like that. uh, and essentially, it was a very laborious process that it was essentially the ROI. I mean, if someone could do it well, it was there, but I'm pretty sure that everyone has felt the frustration of receiving this type of email, and then it's like, oh, that's not really relevant for me, right? So why am I even reading this? And this is, I think, where AI can be a huge value add because fundamentally, it's not about using technology to spam more people. I think marketing and sales, and especially AI-powered marketing and sales, it's really about ensuring that the right message lands on the right person. Because if you come to reflect on it, what platforms like Facebook and Google have done is they've built products where they have a huge number of users. They collect data about the users, and then they can sell ads because they can kind of guess who is going to be interested in a particular product or a service. So now it looks like direct outreach via email has started looking a bit more like this. Obviously, you don't necessarily have the kind of data that Facebook has on its users, but you can automate a large part of the process, make it more efficient, and you can find better prospects and align them with personalized messages, right? So, and it's really three pillars that AI outreach is based on. One is search, the other one is predicting fit, and the final one is crafting the message. Obviously, all these pillars, to an extent, they have always been there, and some of them, like predicting the fit, is something that can be done quite effectively through machine learning. But what the current state of AI has enabled, it has enabled us to do this better and at a more massive scale, and also it has really reduced the friction in terms of implementing these types of solutions, to the extent that if you wanted to create something specifically bespoke for your business, you can even do something by, you can even build this kind of thing by using tools like Zapier and A10 and ChatGPT, instead of having to build a full-fledged product from the ground up. Yeah. In terms of semantic search, that's a feature that we're actually now seeing in more and more platforms. I believe LinkedIn has started implementing this type of functionality. Apollo.io as well, another popular database a prospecting tool, an email tool that I believe Jay also mentioned earlier. And the idea behind this type of search is that you can search using natural language instead of using filters. I think that's like a value add in this process of sourcing leads. Probably not the biggest value add as compared to the next ones that we will see, but it's definitely functionality that and we're going to be seeing integrated in pretty much any kind of software, and probably in the next year or so we're going to see this also happen in other types of search as well. And then predicting fit is where at least things get interesting, at least for me personally, being a data scientist by trade, because this is something that traditionally could be done through machine learning. But I had, to be honest with you, I had never seen this being implemented in any platform. So we had developed a solution for ourselves internally, simply because we were data scientists. But now, through the use of AI, it's way easier to do this kind of thing than ever. So, and essentially, and I'm going to show you some, if you stick to the end of the presentation, I'm also going to share some of the prompts that we use to create our multi-agent system, which I'm also more than happy to email to you if you take up on our offer for a consultation. But essentially, the idea behind predicting fit is that you have an algorithm, could be machine learning model or using AI. This could just be a prompt essentially that calls ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. And then you have some data about the lead, and which could be anything from, the industry and then seniority of the person you want to reach out to. And then you have some information about the offer and your company. And essentially, you ask the AI to identify whether there is a match. And obviously, the more data you add, the more careful the prompt, the better the AI is going to respond. So, for example, if you're able to use some databases like Apollo and other similar tools, and also extract news stories or intent, then you can make a more effective message. Well, where machine learning plays a role in this picture is that if you already have a big database of leads that you've contacted, then you can create a model that also predicts, and some benefits of machine learning is that you can get performance metrics and understand how well this would work in practice and predicts whether someone, for example, will open an email, right? And then you can add some other analytics on top of it, which is something that we did to understand what types clusters of users are more likely respond to particular types of offers. And this is really interesting if you think about it, because it also starts giving you some insights that maybe you wouldn't even be able to get through advertising, right? So that's pretty powerful. And then the main benefit of using AI is essentially crafting messages, and there's many different ways to do it. In this particular scenario, which I'm presenting, and I'm also going to show you the exact prompts that we used, so you can get some ideas. You developed a multi-agent system, yeah, and the point of a multi-agent system is that because you can't provide too much context into an LLM unless you are in the higher tiers, which are more expensive, it's a very good idea to kind of try to put not a super long, instruction set into an LLM and then have another LLM validate the decision that the first one made. So, for example, you can have an LLM that checks style, like an agent, sorry, that checks the style, another one which ensures that the email aligns with certain pain points, uh, and so on and so forth. And also how this works in practice. Sorry, is anyone text? Okay, perfect. So, um, oops, sorry, apologies. Magic happens. Next one. Okay, perfect. So in this for this system we developed, we followed a two-stage outreach framework, and then you'll be able to see soon the two let's say prompts that we used. So the first one is the first stage is focused on a brief generation, which is defining contacts, offers, pain points, etc. Then the second one, the second stage is focused on elaborating on the email, right? So essentially creating variants, improving the email, formatting the style, and so on and so forth. There's nothing magic about the two-stage system. Again, the general principle with multi-agent systems is that you don't want to provide too much context into a single agent. You want to split it out amongst multiple different agents. And because this also helps reduce some of the stochasticity that agent systems have by nature, right? So in the stage one, we go through these multiple different steps, like defining the context, clarifying the value offers. I think this is one of the coolest parts of this whole process, that through this through AI outreach, you can even, that's essentially what we built here, you can match offers to certain personas, right? So you can have 3, 4, 5, 10 different offers and ask the agent to match an offer to a particular profile or even score it, right? So you can say, hey, score how closely this profile would match with this offer and craft an email only for those personas, for those leads where the match is, 70% or higher or something along those lines. And then you can also do other stuff like enrich briefs and so on and so forth. It's very important, and that's more of a technical side note, to ensure that there's some kind of format that the agents can use when they exchange messages in order to communicate with each other. These days, everyone's talking about MCP, Model Context Protocol. I'm not going to expand much or any about it, but it's something I wanted to mention. And then the goal of stage two is to render the actual emails. And the key here is to do something which is better than the old school of crafting emails that was based only around changing one or two variables within the body, like the company name, the first name, and things like that. Create something that's more personalized. It acknowledges new stories around the company or certain challenges they might face in their industry, while at the same time ensuring that the brand tone and the wording, they are pretty much on point. And obviously, once you've perfected this machine, there's nothing stopping you from creating multiple variants, which will also help you bypass spam filters, because spam filters don't like seeing you sending the same email 1,000 times. Yeah. And it's also very important to have an
Hello,
agent to get
hello.
with.
Sorry, kasi po the webinar sa background.
So it's very important to have a built-in agent so you have an agent to ensure style consistency. And I'm going to show you the specific prompt we used. In this particular case, we had some guidelines like keep the subject number of characters in the subject to less than 55, avoid hypersperm-like language, and so on and so forth. Obviously, these guidelines might change from time to time, but again, I think clarity and style is so important. They're so important that you need to have an agent just for that. And then you can also have a critic. This type of architectures, by the way, in multi-agent systems, they're fairly common. And it's something that, again, it may sound kind of cool, like, oh, you have AI agents and whatnot. This is something that, you can easily build using Zapier or NA10. And, if you want to take up an offer, we're more than happy to help you learn how to do this, or we can do it for you if you take up on our offer and just book a call with us. And the role of a critic is to essentially verify everything that happened before and essentially evaluate whether you need to improve any aspects of the emails. Because again, agents, large language models, they're somewhat stochastic, so quite often they can drift and maybe they can make mistakes. And this also quite often happens when you see updates between versions, like moving from ChatGPT 4 to ChatGPT 5 caused a lot of systems to break, and which again is something it's something that can be easily solved, but in any case it's good to always have an additional safeguard. And that's one of the, I think, the single best application of this type of pipeline that I've seen. And we developed this system within this pipeline which can match offer to certain, and not just job titles, but essentially personas, right? So the LLM can judge whether it should offer a service or a product to the particular person. And that's great for two reasons, for two scenarios. One is you want to experiment with multiple offers because you're not sure what the market needs, or maybe you actually provide two, three, four, five different types of services or products, and you want to make sure that you can match them to the right persona. Because if you think about it, this is what advertising platforms are doing, right? So they're just trying to find the right audience for whatever it is that you sell. But now you also have the power to do this through outreach. And yeah, before we conclude this presentation and I share with you some of the prompts that we used, it's something which I'd like to state is that AI outreach is not just a tool, it is a strategic pipeline, right? So hopefully it became evident through the course of this presentation. AI is not only about, in this case, just crafting emails which are somewhat better or are a bit more personalized. It's something you can use not only to increase the rates of opens and clicks, but also it's something that you can use in order to evaluate offers, improve the structure of your outreach overall, but also use it to source analytics and make further improvements in your business. And now, before we conclude, I'm gonna share a different screen where you can see inside some of the secret source, let's say, of this system and understand how this kind of prompts, what do they look like essentially, right? So let me close the screen and open. Yes, so you can see here some of the, okay, let me share. Sublime text, there you go. So you can see here, for example, some of the offers. So you, as I mentioned, you need to follow some kind of structured format. In this case, it's a YAML, and you have a set of fields, like with the CTA type, the asset, like essentially if the AI wants to send someone to a case study, things like that, the description, and so on and so forth. You can see here where the stage one system looks like. That's literally like the whole system, not the code, but like the prompt that we're using. You give an instruction, say, hey, you're this type of, generator. This is the goal. This is the schema that you have to abide by. These are the rules, right? And then in stage two, you provide further requirements, further elaboration, but you also then provide another output schema, right? So you're like, hey, this is what the answer should look like. So then you can use the critic to say, look, this is pass or fail. Right, so that's a very simple multi-agent system. And obviously we're talking about outreach here, right? But this can be applied anywhere. So maybe you're saying this and you're coming out, you're getting ideas for an entirely new different product or service you could provide to your customers, or you could use internally to improve the system. And something I'm also trying to make it clear is that maybe you're hearing words around like AI agents and MCP protocol and this and that. And in reality, all the systems, they're just what you see here. It's a bunch of rules and some kind of format so they can communicate with each other. Here's a style guide to confirm that throughout this chain of LLM communication, you can end up with a very useful result. And what is, for me, what is going to be really, really fascinating is that OpenAI, they said they're going to release ChatGPT 5.1 in the next few weeks. So I guess we'll be seeing it pre-Christmas, and they're going to have a new reasoning model. So it will be very curious to see how reasoning model, especially combined with web search, would be able to do things like match offers against the leads and the prospects. Yeah, so that was it for me. I hope you found this useful. We live in times where AI technology, they're all moving very, very fast, and really our mission here is to help you navigate this landscape. So if you want to hear more, if you want to speak with me directly or Jeremiah, just feel free to use this consultation form, which I just posted on in the chat. And yeah, that was it for today. And I think we have about 5-10 minutes left. So I think me and Jay will be more than happy to take any questions if you have any. Feel free to, there's quite a few people, so I'd say maybe it's best if you just type in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand if you want to use a microphone, and I can unmute you. Thank you. Well, thank you, David, for joining. I hope you enjoyed this. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here with us this evening. Oh, there is a very good question by Matthew. What's the smartest way to structure a new style guide? Well, something which I like doing is when I don't know the answer to this type of question, quite often I ask an AI to help me out, because look, it's not like I'm a cold email expert, right? So, and some of these style recommendations, like the total number of characters in a subject line, the things that you really need to be in the industry to know. So a good way to get an answer for this is to use a tool like ChatGPT or Claude, and use the web search mode or the research mode. So you can go out there and look for articles and information for this kind of thing. And then you can essentially use this to construct the style guide. Now, obviously, if you yourself are an expert in marketing, then you might actually have some ideas that you can just add directly into your prompt. Yeah, thank you, Lillian. I personally like ChatGPT. I'm not saying it's the best. I think this goes to your Matthew's question, who says if you recommend any tools or certain type of templates. I think people have their own preferences for different areas. Like a lot of people now say that Claude is the best in coding. I think probably need to experiment a bit, but also these things change so fast that it's difficult to say which tool is the best at any given time. However, what I find is that if you get used to a particular tool, then you kind of know its pros and cons, its strong points and its weak points. So then you can, know how to work around it. For example, I'm used to coding a lot with Codex, for example, OpenAI's tool. So I kind of know when it fails and why, right? And then I've developed a methodology to kind of circumvent the problem and just go around some of its flaws, if that makes sense. I guess yeah, it's not a question where you can just say yes, that's the ultimate tool, that's the only LLM you'll ever need. And actually, some tools like Cursor, for example, for coding, they use a multi-agent approach. So they have access to all the major LLMs and they choose the best one for you. So we might see more of this meta approach for other things as well. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and we hope you're gonna join some other of our events, and you're gonna take up our offer for a free
Oh, Dr.
consultation.
Stylianos. Oh, we just had
Yeah.
one last one. Sorry. Who
Okay.
updates or revision? Who updates or revises, or who owns the updates or revisions?
Okay, perfect. Well, that's a good question. I guess that's very specific to the context. Yeah, thanks, Jay, for pointing this out. Um, so, in terms of, if you run, let's say, a small business or you're a solopreneur, then I guess you own, right, this guide, so no one else does. So just because you're using a tool, doesn't mean that, the tool owns the data. And again, with a big organization, it's the organization who holds this IP. That being said, what we know is that all the big AI companies are doing some really shady stuff with their data. Yet you upload. I remember a couple of months ago when it was found out that if you share a ChatGPT prompt from the UI with someone, then this gets indexed by Google and it can be found publicly, which is obviously a bit scary if you said something there that was private information. So I guess, and I know that some people and individuals and companies that are a bit paranoid with security, they're like scared of this. I was actually speaking with an entrepreneur a couple of weeks ago who was he was querying ChatGPT because he had used ChatGPT for some of the ideation that went behind his product. He was trying to figure out whether ChatGPT had held this information. So he was asking questions about that product to see whether somehow this information was in the database and he had been trained on that information, which is a bit crazy if you think about it. But especially if you're, let's say, in a type of area that where security is paramount. Obviously, that's it's very important to be careful. That being said, if we're talking about things like brand guidelines, I would assume that's a bit less important because the brand is so like consumer facing that there's really I don't think there's anything secret about it when you want the consumers to see it. Then again, I'm not a branding expert, so maybe someone is on this call and he hears this and they're like, oh my god, no, there's actually so much proprietary information around things like how you need to create videos and what they need to look like and all that, which fair enough. But in any case, yes, if you're worried about data privacy, this you kind of have to be careful, what you share with a large language model, even if it's as simple as a style guide. But for us, as a company, at least for that use case, it wasn't as important. We're not afraid of anyone doing anything with our style guide or brand guide. Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, perfect. Thanks for the questions. Okay, thanks, everyone. We're pretty much on the clock. Again, you hope that you're gonna take up our offer. And as always, if you need anything, feel free to get in touch with us, including if you want access to this prompt or if you want access to the presentation or the recording. And we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you. Have a great night or afternoon, depending on where you're based.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.